Happy Friday. I've been meaning to address this issue for days, if not weeks. And it became critical, in my opinion, to do this after addressing behaviors like ghosting, gaslighting, because I recognized that many of the reflections and the expectations around interactions were more face-to-face in the end than entirely done on text. Despite the fact that I also know that many of our efforts to communicate and our efforts to know one another are done entirely on text. So of course I'm 100 years old, which means I remember when it was, if you didn't do it face to face, it was with this old telephone that had a cord that reached from here to, the West Coast. And if you were lucky enough that your door could close so that you could talk without anybody around, that was considered a privilege, at least in my home, which never happened. So my reference point includes years and years of just the lived effect of when you say something to someone and they say something back and you have this exchange. And it's so reliable because it's no joke. Our communication is primarily expressed in nonverbal communication. That is a huge truth. Obviously, when we're texting, we don't have that. What's the cost? The cost is that it is this unboundaried universe of freedom to communicate anything you want to say. First problem. That means that a person can become grandiose and fearless in reflecting a whole host of things. Why they like you, why they don't, why they want to connect. And then when they want to, they can say anything to build it up specific to perhaps the listener or the reader. Or maybe it is a desire to be with them, romantically. So they can pull anything from the universe and attend to that longing, both within themselves and the other person, any way they want. What it does is it creates this perception of adopting a persona, of being somebody different than, of course, who we'd be when we were sitting across from someone. And we're extending our energy, they're extending theirs, and it's a totally different meeting. So when you're the reader, here's what you have to keep in mind in order to stay safe. The acknowledgement and the awareness that they could be saying anything but who they are, you don't know yet. Because all you're doing is projecting into that interpretation your view, your past experiences, your hopes and dreams. And then likewise, because you too have the universe to decide what you're going to say back, you're braver, bolder, riskier. This is true of conflict. Energy gets weird. Things seem off. Of course, this can be done entirely on text, which means you could be operating on a totally wrong assumption and you'd never know because off you're running. And you're saying stuff that is aggressive or hostile or cruel. And you kind of feel empowered because you can just say it. You can just text it and it's done. It's out there. Energy's out there. Then the other reader who sees this may or may not get the emphasis unless you put it in all caps, unless it's so drastically aggressive or hostile, or conversely love bombing, that then they're tasked to interpret it. Again, reverting back to their history, their story, their projections, their mental health. At the end of the day, this is a lot to do with mental health and emotional intelligence. Now, there are many people who've known this for years. They've developed strategies to keep themselves safe and to protect their heart and their bodies. But I also know that those good intending people still struggle because not everybody else got the memo. Well, what would that mean if they did? Because to do no harm and to protect the safety of yourself and others, there have to be measures put in place. Because you're humble enough to recognize you don't really have a clue. Not until you meet each other in person. And even then, you need time again to know who that one is. because that may have been presented very differently when you're in that zone and you have this sense and you're kind of flowing in things, or you're really flowing in conflict, or it really doesn't matter, because we as human beings, in our capacity to connect, have taken the domain of face-to-face energy and condensed it down to this one mode of communication that has been researched to show if you want to have connection, it's the worst platform to initiate and develop. Well, good luck with that, right? All us old people are going, okay, and we're still, trying to retain the value of face-to-face. But there are generations now and generations that have only been taught to negotiate connection entirely on the platform of texting and now Snapchat, where you can't even retain what you just did. Think about that. You're drinking, you're feeling like you can do whatever you want to do, you're feeling kind of frisky and you just do stuff, and you can't get it back because now it's gone, but you put it out there. It matters. It really matters what you're doing. So some of the measures that I've heard are great. You can do a little bit of research on who they say they are. You can find out if they're, I'm learning, a catfish, which means who they are saying is not really themselves. You have to instill those skill sets of cautious approach in a very layered and deep way. Because if you skip any of those and you just sort of depend on the better angels of other people, you'll be disappointed. You're at risk for getting really hurt. You may fall into the same circular patterns that only got created because of the first attempt of how to know someone and how to know yourself, particularly in response to the flow. I swore I would never be somebody who said, let the good times roll, meaning way back then. Let's just return just a minute to the way it used to be, because that's not forward thinking. That's not integrating what's happening right now. That's not surrendering to a both-and perspective. And that balance of both-and is essential for mental health and for safe relating and for conscious awareness. But I think there's an exception to this. I think you don't throw everything out. I don't think you should put the entire issue in a trash bag and toss it. Because our children are going to only evolve further into this platform of modified connective strategies, because nothing is all one thing. What a gift social media was during 2020 on some level. And again, if you paid attention to the whole picture, social media also offered a tremendous momentum of total destruction, whether it was true or not. This is a tool only. Just like a phone and a fax machine and a computer, it is a tool. Be smarter than that. Be smarter than the sedated homeostasis of just collapsing into the flow of how things are now, and you just take your risks when you can, and you minimize the importance of meeting in person because it's just so much more convenient, and you can pick and choose and swipe this way or that way. Maybe a lot of people don't really care that it reduces the power of connection into something so small and yet so dangerous and so huge. Because our tongue, which creates the words of the things that we say, it's the single most wicked weapon if used inappropriately, because it puts words into form and it makes things happen. That still gets translated to our fingers, because our mind influences what we say. So be mindful. Be diligent. Change course. Evaluate and reflect your patterns of how you connect with people when you only use one domain. Learn from those lessons. Protect yourself. Protect others. Keep this thought process going. Cultivate critical thinking. Know the audience. Know the method of communication. Know yourself. As I always say, it's worth doing, out for you.